Regional markets are continuing to outperform the capital cities, not just in five-year growth, but also in the latest quarterly and year-to-date data from CoreLogic. Internal migration is now holding strong too, with Geelong overtaking the Sunshine Coast as the top destination. To unpack what is driving the regional boom, we're joined now by Terry Ryder, founder of Hotspotting. Terry, always great to have you here on Ticker, of course. What do you think is driving the continued outperformance of regional markets over capital cities?
Well, it's the trend that we call the exodus to affordable lifestyle, and it's been underway for 5 to 10 years. Fundamentally, it's people leaving the two biggest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, and moving to smaller cities or regional areas. It's driven by affordability and lifestyle, the search for that, but it's enabled by technology. Technology has enabled more and more people to work remotely. And so that trend has been underway now out of Sydney for 10 years, Melbourne for the last 6 or 7, and it continues very strongly.
Obviously, during COVID, there was a real big sea change away from capital cities, particularly lockdown cities like Melbourne, moving north, moving out to the regions as well. There had been a belief that post-COVID, people had moved back for those jobs in cities like Melbourne and Sydney. Has that actually happened?
No, it hasn't. The evidence from the Regional Movers Institute, which is published quarterly by the Commonwealth Bank and the Regional Australia Institute, shows that the trend of people moving from the bigger cities to the regional areas is as strong as ever. I never expected it to reverse when COVID was over because it wasn't fundamentally driven by the COVID lockdowns. It certainly became more visible during that period, but it wasn't initiated by that. And also, I think those who expected people to pack up and move back to the cities after it was all over didn't factor in the high cost and the massive disruption that comes with moving from, say, Sydney to a regional area in Queensland. You don't lightly do that. The cost of doing so is high and the disruption to family is high, so you don't lightly do it or reverse it on a whim. So the people who moved have stayed where they moved to, and the trend continues. We're seeing more and more people making that move. In the latest figures in the Regional Movers Institute, 25% more people moved from cities to regions than in the opposite direction, which is a kind of a contradiction to what historically has happened in Australia. For a long time, it's been people moving from the regions to the cities, but in the last 5 to 10 years, the opposite has been happening and is still happening.
Yes, Terry, I was just about to say that we go back to the conversations that we've been having in the news industry over the past 15 years or so, and it's very much been a conversation about the death of regional cities. Why would young people stay there when they can go for opportunities? So what's it doing to these regional towns and regional cities, not just obviously for property prices, but the towns themselves having an influx of professional workers?
Yeah, well, it's certainly pumping up their economies quite nicely, and out of that has come rising prices for real estate. It's making regional centres that are attracting these new residents more vibrant. People are coming from the cities, really appreciating the lifestyle, becoming part of the communities, putting their kids into local schools. All of that is beneficial to local communities. I guess from the viewpoint of people who already live in these places, the one detriment is that it has pumped up prices and perhaps made it harder for local young people to compete with the new residents for available housing, because there is a shortage in these places like everywhere else in Australia.
All right, let's talk actual places now. Which regional areas are actually showing the strongest growth at the moment and why?
Well, at the moment, we're seeing the leaders on price growth. If we look at the first 5 months of 2025, the national price growth leader is Darwin, technically a capital city, but really a regional market as far as I'm concerned. But then follow regional South Australia, regional Western Australia, regional Queensland, regional New South Wales. They're the top performers on price growth so far in 2025. And the big cities like Canberra and Sydney and Melbourne are way behind. They're at the bottom of the list. Perth, which last year was the national price growth leader, has fallen down the list as well. So it's really the regional areas and the smaller cities that are leading on price growth in the year to date. If we look at the results of the last 5 years, and recently we've had a number of the major data houses publishing their list for the biggest growth since COVID struck about 5 years ago. And those lists are absolutely dominated by regional cities, particularly small ones, small regional cities with strong, diverse economies, some sort of lifestyle element to them, and of course affordable housing. Affordability rules at the moment. So these smaller regional centres have led on growth for the past 5 years. And I imagine that if I give you the top 5 or the top 10, a lot of people will be out there saying, where is that? I've never heard of it.
Yes, well, interesting about Geelong overtaking the Sunshine Coast. What's behind that shift?
Well, really, what we're seeing is people leaving the big cities for affordability, lifestyle, and those other reasons, but they're not moving too far. And what that tells me is people want to get out of the big cities, the big, congested, expensive, noisy cities, and have a different lifestyle. Maybe sell their home in a city like Melbourne, buy a home of comparable standard in a regional area and have money left over. But they're not moving too far because they want to stay connected to their capital cities. There might be people who need to go into the office 1 or 2 days a week, but the rest of the week they can work remotely. So the top 5 locations for population gain from internal migration at the moment are Geelong and Moorabool, very close to Melbourne. Then you've got Sunshine Coast, very close to Brisbane. And then you've got 2 locations very close to Newcastle, not far from Sydney, which are Maitland and Lake Macquarie. So there's a bit of a trend evident there.
Yes, what's happening to renters in these areas like Geelong and the Sunshine Coast, though, as we're seeing property prices increase?
Now, well, we're seeing it very much the same trend we're seeing in capital cities everywhere in Australia, really. There is a shortage of rental properties in these places, exacerbated by the influx of new population. The construction industry can't keep up with the demand. They can't develop new housing fast enough. And of course, they're hampered by the reality that the cost of creating new housing, whether they be units, townhouses or houses on a block of land, is incredibly high. So high, in fact, that it's stopping builders and developers from actually producing homes for which they have approvals.
Just quickly, do you see the regional momentum continuing this year?
I certainly do. The trend so far this year, we're almost halfway through 2025, and we've seen the regions again leading on price growth. And so I expect that to continue because the trend that's driving it is still very strong. And of course, coming back to that fundamental question we talked about right at the beginning, that is affordability rules in real estate at the moment. And people can attain that as home buyers more readily in the regions than they can in the big cities. And also investors chasing affordable prices and high rental yields, they can find that far more readily in the regions than they can in the big cities.
All right, Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, always appreciate your time, and co-host of the Property Playbook right here on Ticker. We'll talk soon.
You're most welcome, Aaron.